I want to talk about the main event, and like I said, we're very lucky to have Bryan Doerr, who's volunteered to come this evening and tell his story. Bryan has a BSc, Bachelor of Science Electrical Engineering from Mizzou, a Master's Electrical Engineering from Johns Hopkins, and a Master in Information Management here at WashU. He's been a member of the ITEN Advisory Board, and he's currently an adjunct instructor at WashU teaching, of all things, a class on emerging technologies and innovation. So please join me in giving Bryan a very warm welcome.
Thank you for taking a little bit of time out of your evening to hear the story. I hope I have something interesting to say. If I don't, we'll finish quickly, and you won't feel like it was too painful in terms of the time. What I'd like to do is tell you how Observable Networks kind of quickly came together, how it came together, and give you just a little bit of background about the company, take you through the phases of the company as it kind of went from the very early days up until our acquisition, which just closed July 31st of this year, so a month and a half ago. And then wrap up with some, might be obvious to you, weren't always obvious to me, kind of things that I just learned about the process of being acquired and running a startup. I had envisioned an audience with at least some people who were thinking about starting a company. Should I start a company? Am I qualified to start a company? Do I know what's needed? And then, what does it mean to take a company through an exit? So I tried to capture just some things that stick in my mind as the lessons learned, or things that I knew that I had affirmed for me while I was going through the process of running Observable Networks. So Jim's already given you my background, and the most important point to take away from my background isn't anything about what I've done. It is the following 2 points. First, I was not in any way experienced with the ideas of running a company prior to running a company. So it can be done by people who can think through problems and aren't afraid to show that they don't know something, ask questions, and just move forward. That was my approach, right? I had a very technology-centric business background, and that background led me to be comfortable around technology, and frankly, not a lot else. So finance, HR, all the other things that come along with running a company were all at some level new experiences. But I will say, as being the Chief Technology Officer of Savvis, I got exposure to how those things are done. I sat in board meetings, I sat on the executive team, and so while I wasn't driving a sales process and a forecasting process or a finance review, or I wasn't driving these meetings, I was part of them to the point that I could learn. So I brought that to the table, and perhaps that served me through this process better than I anticipated. Observable Networks, if you don't know, I did not found it. It was founded by Dr. Patrick Crowley at Washington University. Late 2011 is when he got started. He was working on it part-time as he continued in his full professorship status. Obviously, it's a cybersecurity-focused company. The key idea of Observable Networks, just for a little bit of background, is the following. If you understand how a device normally behaves, and device could be generalized to be an entity of any kind, so think of a network router or a server or a person, think of any of those entities, and you know how they normally behave, then the adverse effect of some kind of compromise will show up in a change in behavior. So that's a premise to Observable Networks, that if you understand how something works in a normal situation, and I don't mean the class of thing. I don't mean if you know how a server works, then you will recognize a server that's been compromised. I mean, if you know how server A normally behaves, and person X normally behaves, and toaster Y, right? Very specific entity-based modeling. Then you can recognize when that device has undergone some kind of compromise. And that you can build those models, those understandings, from the metadata that exists in IP networks as a byproduct of those entities communicating on the network. So if you gather up all the evidence of communication on the network from all of the devices that are on the network, or all the entities that are participating in the network, and you build these models, then you can have a complete picture of every named entity on the network, and if something changes, you can recognize it. And that's what we built out at Observable Networks. Patrick was the founder of this idea. The motivation that he brought forth was the following, that historically, security had been a function of being able to look at and inside of network packets to find the signatures present in viruses and other forms of malware that might exist there. And with the recognition of a signature, block the communication, right? So prevention was the key idea, and is today, for many network security devices. If I put up a perimeter, inspect everything coming in, I can block the bad stuff. Well, there are some obvious holes there. The first one is what we all know to be the insider problem, right? I may have someone inside my network who's now a problem, and that's not going to help me, preventing them from getting in at the perimeter. They're already in. And sending my data out won't be a problem. Another problem, though, and the one that Patrick had foremost in his mind when he formed Observable, was the encryption problem. As network encryption becomes more and more prevalent, and so today 35 or 40% of enterprise network communication might be encrypted, it's rising rapidly. All of the internet is moving toward encrypted traffic, especially where business is concerned. And when encrypted data is present, it's not so easy to look inside the packets. In fact, unless you're willing to decrypt the packets at the perimeter, then inspect them, then re-encrypt them, you can't look inside the packets. So for many companies, using a classic kind of perimeter defense using typical intrusion detection systems, recognizing malware as it comes into their network is impossible because it is embedded inside encrypted communications. And that problem is growing daily. So that's the problem that we tried to solve. At acquisition, we had grown the company to about 90 customers. That list of customers ranged from very, very small customers paying us on the order of $50 a month to our largest customer paying us over $14,000 a month. And we had a number of different successes and some things that we would clearly rate as not successes. And so today I'll tell you a little bit more about that. Just to give you this is a little bit too dark to see, but just to give you a snapshot of the solution that we built and continue building. This is a display that actually you put on a big screen and updates dynamically and gives you some visually interesting things to look at. This is more of an analysis display. The output of observable networks are things called alerts. Alerts are very simply the indicators of some kind of change in behavior that we think you should know about and investigate. And as a design philosophy, we basically said this: if we ask for your attention to investigate an alert, we want you to think that your time was well spent. That's quite a bit different than many security solutions today, where if you look at the output of these solutions, all I can say is there's a lot of output, right? There's way more than you could possibly ever have look at on a complete basis. And our philosophy was, if we're generating an alert and you spend time investigating it, we hope that you found that time valuable. That's not to say that it will always be a threat, right? But it will be something that you're glad you knew about as a change in behavior in your network. That's the litmus test we held ourselves to. And so Any questions? By the way, you're welcome to ask questions throughout. I'll moderate our time and make sure we're out the door in a reasonable period of time and we'll go on. But I know what it's like to sit there and have a question and not want to wait till the end, so please just interrupt me. If you don't interrupt me, we'll be done pretty fast. Yeah?
How unique is this?
We like to say very unique. Not unique in the sense that analyzing metadata was somehow new to the world, right? Other companies had been doing that. In fact, the company that we are now a part of, Cisco, acquired a company called Landcope that had been doing metadata analysis for a long time, 15 years. But the idea that you could use metadata to build high-fidelity models, not of a class of devices, not of the aggregated network, but of each individual entity on the network, that was a novel thing. Right? And to do that, we needed cloud resources, right? Which automatically limits you in time to when that kind of resource was available. By comparison, you could never do this in an appliance that you deploy on site, like a firewall. You need assets that you cannot get a hold of anywhere other than in the cloud. Starting with that as an infrastructure available to us, then the algorithms you design become very, very possible. We didn't find anybody really with the same capability that in our searching. And also the messaging, two components of the messaging. The first is that, hey, this encryption thing's coming up to bite us. Who's doing what about it, right? People were certainly talking about that, but it was not a common refrain in the industry. In fact, for many in the industries whose cash cows are intrusion detection systems, that's not a great message because it disrupts that solution to a degree. There are mitigating circumstances and mitigating approaches. They can be deployed. Some are better, some are worse, but it's a message that wasn't loudly heard. And lastly, this idea that you can generate a meaningful number of alerts, meaningful to the point where someone can actually investigate each and every one that you would generate and show you value without overloading you with quantities of information. That was also something rather different in security. In fact, we spent a lot of time, kind of fast forward, selling into clients who claimed their number one objection to our solution was that it wasn't generating enough output, right? And it was, when you pursue that with people, it gets to be some pretty funny conversations. Like, so you're saying you'd like more false indicators of network intrusion. Well, I have a lot of people and they expect your tool to do a lot of stuff and they expect this, yeah, but we're showing you the things you should be paying attention. Maybe those people could do something else. It's weird. Yeah, you're selling against the mindset. If you're quiet, you must be broken, right? It's not configured correctly. We've installed it wrong. You don't work the way you say you work. It was weird conversations. So, 4 phases that I'll talk about tonight. Funding, pre-funding, early selling, the AWS market, and the phase that we got acquired. The first one, pre-funding, as I indicated, run by Patrick. During that time, Patrick was developing the solution on planes back and forth from conferences in his spare time. He actually produced a version of the product. He got early funding from Peter Finley here in St. Louis, an angel funder, hired his first employee, and through 2012, including the 2012 win of the first Arch Grant Award group, he continued to evolve the solution. I joined Patrick as a consultant in January of 2013. We knew of each other very incidentally from a prior relationship relating Washington University to Savvis, but we didn't know each other real well. My time as a consultant for Observable spanned from January of 13 to August of 13, and during that time we worked very closely together and came to know each other very well. And it was at the culmination of that period, August of 2013, when we took the first part of our Series A funding. The funding there was Vectus, the Vectus fund here run by Stifel and Brook Private Equity. And at that time, I then became the Chief Executive Officer of Observable. and Patrick stepped into the founder and chief technology officer role of the company. We always ran the company from that moment forward as a pair. We never had a hierarchy between us, always a collaboration on everything. But we had our spheres of responsibility. I was on the go-to-market side, imagine that. He was on the technology side, but we made all the major decisions for the company in a collaborative way. So at the end of our Series A process, which concluded in April of 2014, we had our third investor, which was DH Capital. And DH Capital put in the lion's share of our Series A investment, and that's what got us started. And that brought the kind of what I call the pre-funding stage to a close.
Who brought DH to the table?
Interestingly, DH came to the table through a relationship by a third person who was on our team for about 2 years, Vincent DeMemo, who was helping us with sales and marketing activities. And Vince knew of a person who was doing scouting for DH Capital. Brought that person to the table. They did a couple of rounds of discussion and diligence. They brought DH in and a couple more rounds, and that's how it happened. So it was an acquaintance, first person acquaintance with a deal hunter that existed for DH. Any other questions? So from kind of September through September, 2 years, it's kind of what I think of as the early selling period. That was marked by first a prolonged effort to hire professional sellers. I never knew it could be so hard to hire professional sellers. There's a great reluctance to just drop what you're doing when you're a seller and join a no brand, new message kind of thing. It's also a timing thing. It's always like they're approaching the end of the quarter. They have a big deal that they want to get paid on, so they're going to stay. And then, that deal slips, and now it's another quarter. And we spent easily 9 months looking for our first seller. And so we finally landed that person in the middle of 2014. We did our commercial launch a couple of months before then. So we transitioned from beta to commercial availability. We carried along about 3 beta customers that had been kind of working with us, helping get the solution to a point where it was ready to go. I'll say this is the important part here. Lumpy success is followed by long periods of silence. From 2014 through, I remember, getting ready for a board meeting. It was early 2015, and I just didn't have any real growth at all to report. A customer here and a trial there, just not a lot of success. And I really began wondering when it was going to happen. Then we'd win a deal and we'd celebrate, and then the silence would resume again. And so there was a lot of uncertainty as we tried to distill why we weren't winning deals. So here's our selling philosophy at the time looked like this. Try and find anybody that would be interested in the message that we had. Give that company a free trial of the service for 60 days, and then try and convince them to become a paying customer. And by the way, that more or less encapsulates where we are even today. But we established that pattern, and we get people to listen to our message, but the number of folks that would actually sign up for the trial was fairly low. We couldn't figure out why. I think at the end of the day that our problems were just that we sounded like we were too early. We didn't have a message that sounded like what other people had heard. We sounded like a company who was really trying to get some new idea to be accepted, and it was different than what folks were used to hearing. And I think we just struggled. Also, the primary appeal for our service we found to be the mid-market, but the mid-market wasn't really ready to buy security yet in anything other than certain sectors, finance, healthcare. Those folks would buy. or would think deeply about things. And some of our earliest customers were in those markets. The larger companies looked at us as, in many cases, just another tool. Look, I've already got 30. I feel like I may not have every use case that you folks covered with my 30 tool sets, but adding 31 to get the remainder doesn't feel like a great choice for me. We were also doing things a little bit differently. We were selling a subscription service for security. So what was happening there? All of your data, not your network raw data, but your network metadata, is headed into the cloud. Well, that gave a lot of people pause, right? Wait a minute, I keep all that stuff on my premises. Why on earth would I let you send it into the cloud? And so, just some things, some friction, some hurdles that we're trying to get past on a regular basis. Thank goodness for St. Louis customers, some of our largest early customers, and I can't name customers, it's just kind of part of the protocol of the industry to not talk about people who are buying your security story or your security product, so I apologize for being vague, but if any of them happen to be here, they'll be able to raise their hand and say, I was one, but we did have great support by St. Louis companies, companies that today remain our customers.
During this time period, about what was your headcount?
So we were so during that period, 8 people. We had one seller on the East Coast that we hired. We had myself and Patrick, and then engineers. Then we brought on a marketer who helped us with our website. And because we realized we wanted to start getting people to just self-register and get online, by themselves, find us and get online. By the way, people will magically find you on the internet. That's the fallacy. They won't magically find you, but they do start to show up in little dribs and drugs.
If I could ask a question about what you mentioned earlier about the St. Louis customers.
Yep.
We hear a lot, just the opposite of what you said, that it's very difficult, especially for startup tech companies, to really get traction here in St. Louis. A lot of companies find their first customers somewhere else.
Yep.
So do you think it was the WashU connection, or what was it that enabled you to be successful with local companies?
Our solution is easy to bolt on, right? So you don't have to go through a major deployment throughout your network. You don't have to devote a whole bunch of training. It's easy to install. It's easy to understand the output. It's easy to use and evaluate. And that made it for companies who were motivated to do some acts of charity, some charitable investment in the startup community, that made it an easy give for them, right? It didn't take major reconfiguration, major bets, and we're not expensive as security tools go. We're very inexpensive, as it turns out. And so, I think there were a couple of factors working for us with some companies. That didn't make it a no-brainer. And we tried many more St. Louis companies than we won with. I'll be honest about that. But the folks that did stay with us showed us a lot, and that was very important to us. It was also during this period that the most important decision, first the recognition by one of our developers, which actually turned out to be the thing that probably saved the company. And another recognition by another one of our employees, but obviously I think Patrick and I also played a role here. So at this point in time, we are growing at a rate that's not going to impress anyone. We have a product, it's getting better, but we're not going to be able to get additional funding based on our growth rate. Amazon Web Services, which all of you probably know about, and where we hosted our environment, hosted our application, released something called VPC Flow Logs, virtual private center flow logs, which was basically the Amazon version of the metadata that we collect from company networks on premises. In other words, they were making available as a service all of the data that Observable needed to do the modeling that we did on an endpoint-by-endpoint basis, which, by the way, gave us a completely frictionless way to start performing our service in Amazon Web Services, in AWS. Before, we had no solution for Amazon Web Services. Now we've got the best solution because companies could sign up for our service, deploy nothing, give us just read access to their flow logs, and restart endpoint modeling their Amazon environment. And, coincidentally, while companies have 30 tools that they've purchased for their on-premises environment, they have next to 0 tools for their Amazon environment. And everyone's headed to Amazon. So, huge growth market and huge need.
What did it take to get that?
Get what?
To get that?
So, one Friday, one of our developers realized that this service existed. The following Monday, he worked all weekend, told nobody. The following Monday, we were ingesting those flow logs. And Patrick and I looked at each other and went, oh my gosh, right? This could be huge. We weren't certain, but I don't want to say we recognized it immediately as the thing, but we did see it was going to possibly be big.
Is this like an API?
Yes, via an API that they make available, you can now extract all of the flow data, flow record metadata that you need, that we would need to do our service. So this Monday, we come in and we've got this capability, and that played a huge role in our next, in our next phase. But along with that, we realized the following. Yeah.
Were you evaluating the logs in the AWS cloud?
Yes, we're hosted in AWS,
Okay.
so all of our service is based there. And so to basically extract and process the logs right there was
Right in your backbone.
it was a no-brainer, right? For those of you wondering, do other public clouds have the same capability? As of today, the answer is no. Google Cloud, Azure, not ready at the same level of visibility that AWS is. The other thing that came together at almost the same time, within a month or so, was our recognition about what it takes to be successful delivering a service. And this is a passion of mine. A service as opposed to a good, right? So what are we doing? We're delivering a software as a service capability. It is rooted in an API or a user interface that's in a portal that presents the information you need. It's calculated and grinding in real time. If our service would go offline, your interaction with our service would stop. It's very much a service. It's not a professional service in the sense that it's people. It's not a professional service in the sense that it's an electrician. It's a service in the sense that it's a live dialogue between us and our customers that continues on a regular basis and the way the industry, the way the literature talks about this is a good, right, packages value, delivers it, and customers then extract that value. In a service, value is co-created.
It's not just a tool.
It's not just a tool, it's something that has to work and be part of the dialogue with the customer. And we hired a support person, a person who was an engineer, and he was just phenomenal at interacting with our clients in this way, right? In a way that co-created their value. He had answers to their questions in time frames that they needed them, and if you polled 89 out of 90 of our customers and asked them what was one of the top 2 experiences they had with Observable, I guarantee you they would say our support person. I don't want to name him because I don't know if he wants to be named, but he was just, frankly, from a customer relationship perspective, there are no words to describe how important he was in that value creation story. And so both of these things came together about the same time. And the third thing that happened was, hey, we started advertising. Somebody found us on the internet. As soon as we had this flow log ingestion capability, we quickly put ourselves on the internet as having this capability. And sure enough, somebody did an internet search and found us. And the somebody was somebody all of you have heard of, nobody in St. Louis, that is a big old company and a very modern company, all hosted in AWS. Looking for something to process VPC flow logs. And so they found us, turned us on, and through this technology, this person's efforts, and this company, we reshaped our company. And that was a huge thing for us. And so, starting in, Patrick and I actually made the conscious decision to take our entire company messaging and pivot to Amazon Web Services. So while we still had our other services available, and still talked about them, all of our marketing, all of our web material, all of our conference conversations were focused around our support for Amazon Web Services through VPC flow logs. And the customers started coming, right? So we started growing to the tune of 25% per quarter, which isn't lights out, but it's not bad. So growth improved. We went to Amazon reInvent in mid-2016, or late 2016. We normally would get 3 to 5 trials a month. We turned up 115 trials in 2 days at Amazon reInvent.
So did you confront a sudden need for much more staff and much more infrastructure?
Much more infrastructure, yes, but that's just turning on more capacity in AWS, right? So no more people. We hired no more. We are a testament to the fact that you can be small or large in AWS and your infrastructure team doesn't change size.
You've been on your customer service person?
Same guy, because another thing we were doing was automating the experience, finding through his interactions. So we want to be much less head-centric and much more vending machine-centric, right? But you can't do that too quickly because you don't get that, co-creating experience. If it feels too automated and too off the mark, you're going to miss. So we were simultaneously automating his discoveries, his recommendations, benefiting from his daily labors as well, and growing our infrastructure, all without changing our cost structure. The only people we were adding were engineers to keep feature sets rolling more quickly. When we were acquired, we were only 14 people. So we weren't, yeah.
It sounds like prior to the AWS Insight,
Yes.
it sounds as if there was no sales effort that could have been successful.
I don't think there is. I don't think there is in hindsight. I wouldn't have been, I guess I would have admitted to myself, but we were too busy trying to break the rocks of getting sales engagements. And we were having spotty successes, but it wasn't going to be the success that did this, or most importantly, that led to a B round funding. The customers that were interested the most were mid-sized customers that weren't transacting very regularly, and when they would be small, and larger customers were really, really hard to come by. But in AWS, they were much easier to come by. And we had a reverse flow. Find us in AWS, take us down to your prem, sponsored by somebody using us effectively.
Do you have intellectual property?
Do we have intellectual property? We have a lot of it. The intellectual property is related to modeling and finding the threats inside the network traffic that we're analyzing.
In terms of patent?
Yes, we have a patent. We applied for and received our first patent in June of 15, and we have another application live now. Signed up a lot of customers at reInvent, started to get enterprises showing interest in our solution, recognizing where they didn't have great security, and that started to change the dynamic of the company fairly significantly. We also started to get more obsessed with metrics. Once you've got a number of customers, you can start to look statistically at your business. Two of the metrics that were really important to us, remember at the outset I said we want people to feel like we asked for their attention and it was worth their time to give it to us. Well, this metric right here confirms that. 90%, greater than 90% actually, of the alerts that we generated that were processed by our customers were rated as helpful by our customers. We only gave you two choices. When you close this alert, was it helpful or not helpful? Greater than 90% said it was helpful. Right? So that told us we were starting to achieve that vision we had. It wasn't like universal acclamation, but it was giving us the right view. Secondly, conversions from trial. If you were a customer and you activated a trial with us, 73% of the time for up at September 30th, 2016, and it's still about 70%, 70% of the time, you would activate and become a customer. So that told us something important too. Don't worry about qualifying trials. Just get people trialing the service. Get them trialing it however we can. Give away free trials. So we started promotions and things that were related to the idea that if you start our service, you're going to like it, and our job is just to get you to try it.
Do you have an onboarding process for your trial? Because I find with my CEO out of Ireland all the time, I keep telling them that we need a customer success engineer. Define the criteria and onboard the customer. You can't throw them over the fence and pray to God it works.
Yeah, that's exactly right. What we did as we started to get more and more of these trials is start to realize what it took from the moment a customer said, I'm interested and I'll sign up on their webpage for the trial, to actually get them through the process and make them happy. Our service works well on its own, but customers need some comfort. They need to get their head around what you've got. They need some, and this is where the support engineer was unbelievable, helping people, understand what was happening. He would proactively surface interesting things for them to go look at. He would develop links and pictures for them to see what we were showing them. It still is to this day a really neat process, and it explains 70%, frankly.
Yeah, because I just see that during the trial, we get a lot of customers that would call up and go, well, you said what we weren't going to get, we're getting. Why?
Yeah.
Well, did you call support? Well, no, why do I have to call support for?
Yeah.
Why aren't you just fixing the problem?
Yeah.
So.
No, and by the way, as we migrate to Cisco, there are challenges here, right? There are things that have to be learned by the larger organization. As we approached 17, we began thinking about our B round, and more deeply, we canvassed a lot of investors. We told our story, a very AWS-centric story. We got good feedback. With the folks we talked to, we did get interest, and I think that would have ended successfully. But in that process, Cisco approached us and said, we've got a number of different ways we like to interact with companies like you. One of them is investment. Another one, frankly, is acquisition. Would you be open to talking with us about it? And Patrick and I, as we thought about what the B round was going to be shaped like and what would be best for the region, for our companies, for our company employees and investors, we thought a Cisco exit would be good if it actually went somewhere. 7 months of conversation before it actually culminated in a term sheet. So it was a long process. In that process, we had to put our B round a bit on hold while we kind of went through it. There was more diligence and more investigation and more questions than I would ever have dreamed possible. Cisco was actually a customer for 5 months evaluating our service before they bought us. So this was not just a kind of drive by and pick up a company or don't look too hard. It's only X million dollars. And so where we are today is we're integrating. I was just telling Jerry earlier that what we were acquired 6 weeks ago, the transaction closed on July 31st, and the first task we had was to become generally available to the entire Cisco sales force by getting on the Cisco GPL, the Cisco General Price List. And we did that in 6 weeks. It normally takes 6 months. So we're pretty excited about where we go from here. So you recall the company that I mentioned, they had purchased a few years ago that was doing similar kinds of analysis with metadata in an appliance fashion. That was Landcope. We are now tucked into the Landcope business in Cisco, which is headquartered out of Alpharetta, Georgia. We are branded now Cisco StealthWatch, which was the product that Landcope offered, Cloud. So Cisco StealthWatch Cloud is now Observable Networks product. The other product that still is carried forward from Landcope is called Cisco StealthWatch Enterprise. So there's a portfolio of StealthWatch capabilities coming out. So that's where we find ourselves today. I promised a couple of things that I thought were the things that stuck with me in the process, and I've been a little bit wordy, so I'll be a bit quick and make sure there aren't any questions. Whoops.
I ask a question?
Yep.
Can you do that?
Yep.
So what's the future of Cisco in St. Louis?
So Cisco's always been here in the form of a sales office, right, out in Chesterfield. Patrick and I run Observable out of St. Louis, out of Clayton. Every employee from Observable, all 14 of us, became Cisco employees. They're all still employed today. So some things I learned along the way, and again, I had in mind an audience of people who might be thinking about starting or exiting a company. I got to tell you, board operations are absolutely key. And I don't just mean throughout the life cycle of the company, I mean like keep your board artifacts in order. Make sure your minutes are in order. Make sure your resolutions are in order. Keep your board communications and relationships and artifacts in order. It seems like something that nobody cares about. When a company like Cisco comes along, they care a lot about it. So we were too aggressive with our initial growth plans. I would absolutely divide by the page number of a book I'm looking at the next time I produce a growth plan for a startup company. Right? It just isn't going to happen no matter what you think as fast as you think it's going to happen. And it didn't for us. We had to pivot to find the right answer. Right when I became CEO, the very next month, we went with Insperity as a PEO, so we could give benefits and get workman's comp and 401k and payroll and all that stuff. I don't regret that for a day. Did it cost us more on a per employee basis? Could I have spent more of my time trying to run those things to ground? Sure enough, but this was well spent. And again, when the acquisition came along, all of our employee ducks were in a complete perfect row. I would recommend that in a heartbeat. I found out that CEOs do everything. I would do everything from find real estate for us to live in and shop for used desks at secondhand stores to grocery shop for snacks every other week. What I found helpful was kind of a paradigm that I had discovered kind of prior to this, servant leadership. I don't know if anybody has spent any time looking at servant leadership. That philosophy helped me a lot because really you are just kind of keeping things in a state that will allow others to be productive. Yeah, you're making big decisions like pivot to AWS and so forth, but more often than not, you're trying to just help everybody else be as efficient as they can to do their job. We are a complete agile shop, and believe me, it works. If you're into software development. Fundraising, I was told by a number of people that if you have a large company, a large customer, big customer of some brand reputation, and you've got a compelling story, fundraising will be no problem. That's not the case. It's never the case. I didn't find that to be the case with any investor I talked to. Your first round conversations always go well. Every one of them that I had went well. Most of them had no intention of investing. The key is to figure out when you can be aligned with that person and ask that investor and ask intelligent questions. By the time we got to our B round, we understood how to manage that process more effectively, and we were in a much better shape to be invested in. Let's see, I'm running out of time. A couple of other things about the investment community. Market customers, bet and commit to a market. That's what we did effectively, but not too quickly. We knew AWS was right when we saw the opportunity. If we hadn't been struggling for a year, we wouldn't have known that, right? So we needed the right time and the right opportunity. Service offers need their own approach to success. It isn't a good. It isn't shipment of a good. It isn't the same customer relationship, and you need to keep an eye on that. And the more metrics we started computing, the better we understood our business. Even if we thought we had an intuitive grasp for things, computing the metrics makes a difference. The SaaS metrics we started computing told us where we weren't operating our business infrastructure effectively. The conversion metrics were guiding us toward philosophies around selling. The customer satisfaction metrics were telling us where we were hitting our goals with respect to the customer experience that we wanted. So all of those things were important, and I wish we had measured and defined and measured more, even before they weren't needed, right? You can always stop computing them if they're not helping. Define them, calculate them, and see what you learn. And that's my story. So